All right, so today we're going to take a deep dive into something pretty major happening right now.
Uh-huh.
President Trump's decision to use this thing called the Alien Enemies Act. It's this old law from way back in 1798. Yeah, and he's trying to use it to deal with immigration.
Interesting.
Yeah, so we've got a whole bunch of news reports about it, and we're going to try to break it all down, right?
Okay.
Figure out exactly what this act is all about,
Right.
how it's being used right now, and, like, all the legal stuff that's already happening because of it.
I see.
It's already causing a lot of controversy.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
This is a big one. I mean, you're talking about a law that's older than the Bill of Rights even.
Seriously.
Yeah, 227 years old, and all of a sudden it's like smack in the middle of this huge legal fight.
Wow.
So the Alien Enemies Act basically gives the president, like, a lot of power over people who aren't U.S. citizens.
I see.
Specifically, if they're from a country that the U.S. says is, like, invading or doing something called a predatory incursion.
Predatory incursion.
Yeah, it's kind of a vague term, right? But the thing is, historically, this act has pretty much only been used during times when we were actually at war.
Like, officially at war.
Yeah, like declared wars, you know?
Okay.
Think War of 1812, World War I, World War II, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. So that makes what's happening now even more unusual, right?
Exactly.
Because we're not at war with anyone officially. But Trump says he's activating this act, and boom, almost immediately people start filing lawsuits.
Yeah, there was a lawsuit filed by 5 Venezuelan guys who were stuck in immigration detention, you know, in Texas and New York.
So this is already affecting real people right now.
Absolutely. This isn't just some legal theory. It's happening right now. And speaking of things happening right now, the timing of what happened right after Trump's announcement is really important.
Okay.
Reports say that on the same day, that Saturday, 261 people were deported to El Salvador.
Wow, that many.
Yeah, and a senior administration official even said that 137 of those deportations were because of this Alien Enemies Act.
Specifically because of that.
Yeah, they said it was because of suspected gang ties. They think those people are connected to a Venezuelan gang called Tren de Aragua.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Trump says he's going to use this law, this act.
Yeah.
And within hours, a ton of people are deported, and they're using this law to justify it, saying it's because of these gang connections.
You got it.
But then didn't a judge step in?
Yeah, that's right. A federal judge, Chief Judge James E. Boasberg, he's from the District Court for the U.S. District of Columbia, he issues this thing called a temporary restraining order.
Oh, I've heard of that.
And basically, he puts a 14-day hold on these deportations, like stop everything for 2 weeks.
Wow.
And the fact that a judge did that so quickly, you know, right after everything happened, it kind of tells you there's some serious concern about whether these deportations were even legal.
I see.
Or if they were done the right way.
So then what happened?
Well, the White House and the Justice Department, they came back and said, no. These deportations happened before the judge made his order.
Oh, so now it's a question of timing.
Right. They're saying it's all about the timeline. Like, the deportations happened first, order came second.
And of course, the other side says the opposite.
Exactly. It's a direct contradiction.
Yeah.
So now it's this whole fight about when everything went down, which is pretty important in a legal case like this.
Huge. Yeah. So let's get into the actual lawsuit.
Okay, so
The ACLU and Democracy Forward, they're representing those 5 Venezuelans we talked about, right?
Yep.
And they're saying this Alien Enemies Act is a wartime measure, which makes sense given when it's been used before.
Right.
And their argument is that using it against these Venezuelans when, you know, we're not at war with Venezuela is completely illegal.
Yeah, they're really hammering that historical angle, you know, that this law has always been used during official wars.
So they're saying, like, it's not allowed right now. But I feel like there's more to their argument than just that, right?
Yeah, they're definitely going deeper than that.
Like, they're not just saying it's a wartime thing. They're saying the administration's reason for even using the act is messed up.
Exactly.
What exactly are they saying?
So their lawsuit says the administration is, like, twisting the meaning of the act. You know, taking those words and making them mean something they don't.
Okay, so they're saying the administration is, like, misinterpreting it on purpose.
Yeah, basically. They're saying, look, just because this gang, Tren de Aragua, exists and some Venezuelans might be involved, doesn't mean that all Venezuelans coming here are part of some invasion by a foreign government. Like, that's just not what the act is talking about.
It seems like a pretty big leap in logic.
Yeah, and they're saying it's dangerous, too. Because if you can just say any group of people is an invasion because of a gang,
right,
where does it stop? Kind of feels like anyone could be a target then. Right.
Exactly. And wouldn't that be a huge problem for people's rights? Like, what about their right to due process?
Oh, that's a big part of the lawsuit, too.
So what are they saying about that?
They're saying the government could basically just point at any Venezuelan in the U.S. and be like, gang member, deportation, without any real proof.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, and then deport them without giving them a real chance to fight back in court.
So no chance to prove they're innocent or...
And that's their main point.
Mm.
And this lack of a chance to challenge their deportation, that's a huge violation of their rights.
So it's not just about whether this act can be used now, but it's also about whether it's being used fairly.
Yeah, I did it. It's about the process, the fairness, everything.
And then it gets even crazier because on top of all this, they're saying Trump's administration might have ignored the judge's order altogether.
Oh, yeah, that's another bombshell in this case.
What happened?
So the plaintiffs, those 5 Venezuelans, they're saying that some deportation flights were already in the air when the judge issued the order.
So they were like on their way already.
Yeah, and they're arguing that those flights should have turned around.
Because of the judge's order.
Exactly. And they even want the government to swear under oath, give official statements about the exact timing of those flights.
So they basically want proof.
Yeah, including for one flight that was supposedly headed to Ecuador.
Yeah.
So it really raises the question, did the Trump administration just completely disregard a court order?
I mean, if they did, that's a huge deal, right?
Absolutely. That would be a big legal problem and could have some major consequences for the administration.
So basically, we've got this back and forth about when exactly those flights left compared to when the judge made his ruling.
Exactly. And both sides are really digging in on that timeline, which tells you it's a really important part of the case.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we've talked about how the ACLU and Democracy Forward are challenging this whole thing, right?
Yeah.
But what about the government? How are they responding? I mean, did they just sit back and take it?
Oh, they definitely did not just sit back. The Justice Department jumped right in and appealed that temporary restraining order from Judge Boasberg.
Oh, so they're fighting it.
Yeah, they're basically saying, we don't agree with this order, and we're taking it to a higher court.
Okay, so what's their argument?
Well, their main point is about jurisdiction. They're saying this court in D.C. doesn't even have the right to decide this case.
Why not?
Because none of the 5 Venezuelans in the lawsuit were actually detained in D.C., remember?
Right, some were in Texas and one was in New York.
Exactly. So they're saying that the case should be handled in those states, not in D.C. And then they also downplayed the whole Alien Enemies Act thing.
What do you mean?
They said that even talking about invoking the act right now is just speculation.
So basically they're trying to make it seem like it's not even a real issue yet.
Pretty much. It's a clever legal strategy, right?
Yeah.
Question the court's authority, downplay the importance of the act, and try to move the whole thing to a different court.
That's pretty savvy, but did it work?
Well, not exactly. Judge Boasberg wasn't really buying it.
What happened?
So they had this emergency hearing, and Judge Boasberg decided to actually expand his temporary restraining order.
Really? So instead of backing down, he went even further.
Yeah, he made it apply to all non-citizens in U.S. custody who might be affected by Trump's decision to use the Alien Enemies Act.
Wow, so he basically shut down the administration's plan, at least for now.
For now, yeah. And that definitely suggests he thinks this case is about more than just those 5 initial plaintiffs.
Makes sense. I mean, if it could happen to them, it could happen to others, right?
Exactly. And the judge is basically saying, this court does have a role to play in this. We need to protect people's rights.
And then on top of the legal back and forth, some pretty strong opinions started flying around from people in the administration.
Oh, yeah, there were some heated statements for sure.
Anything specific that stood out?
Well, Attorney General Pam Bondi, she came out swinging.
Oh, yeah, she's known for that. What did she say?
She basically accused Judge Boasberg of putting Tren de Aragua terrorists ahead of the safety of Americans.
Wow.
She said the judge's order totally disrespected the president's authority.
And put people at risk.
Yeah, she basically said the order ties the hands of law enforcement and makes everyone less safe. It was a very strong response.
Definitely. It was a very pointed attack on the judge's decision.
Exactly, and a very clear indication that the administration is not backing down on this.
It was a bold move for sure. But the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, she also chimed in, right?
Yeah, she did.
And she kind of doubled down on the whole timeline thing, didn't she?
She did. She kept saying the administration didn't refuse to comply with the court order.
Right.
And that the deportation flight to El Salvador left before the order even happened.
So they're sticking to their story.
They are. And that makes the timing dispute even more important.
Absolutely. So we've talked about the domestic legal battle, but this whole situation has gotten international attention too, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah. It's definitely made waves beyond the U.S.
What happened?
Well, remember the deportation flight to El Salvador?
Yeah.
The president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, he posted about it on social media.
Oh,
Yeah. And he even seemed to make a little jab about the timing.
what did he say?
His post said, oopsie, too late.
Oh, see, too late.
Yeah, like the flight already landed.
Right, right.
And what's really interesting is that U.S. officials, including people like Senator Marco Rubio and White House Communications Director Stephen Chung, they shared Bukele's post.
So they were like amplifying his message.
Very much.
So basically, the president of another country is making a public statement about a legal issue happening in the U.S., and U.S. officials are like applauding it.
That's basically what happened.
That's wild.
It definitely adds another layer of complexity to this whole situation. Like, are they trying to send a message? Are they challenging the court's authority?
Mm.
It's hard to say for sure, but it's definitely a bold move.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole issue about judicial review or lack thereof that the lawsuit brought up.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. What's the deal with that?
So the lawsuit argues that under Trump's plan, anyone labeled an alien enemy could be immediately deported without any real chance to appeal or have their case reviewed by a court.
So basically, no chance to fight back legally.
Exactly. And that's a huge problem for due process
Uh.
and the right to legal recourse.
Right, because everyone deserves their day in court, right?
That's the principle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this situation raises some serious concerns about whether that principle is being upheld.
Okay, so this temporary restraining order that the judge issued, it's only temporary, right?
Right. That's the key word.
So what happens next? What are the next steps in this legal battle?
Well, the next hearing is scheduled for March 21st.
Okay, so pretty soon then.
Yeah, less than 2 weeks away. And that hearing is going to be important. We'll probably get more details about the legal arguments from both sides,
Right.
more information about when exactly those deportation flights happen.
Right.
And we might even get a better sense of how the court feels about whether this Alien Enemies Act can even be used in this situation.
All right, so let's recap what we've covered in this deep dive. We've got a really old wartime law, the Alien Enemies Act, being used in a situation where the U.S. isn't officially at war.
Exactly.
We've got a major legal challenge that says this is an abuse of presidential power and a misinterpretation of the law. We've got conflicting stories about when those deportations happened compared to when the judge made his ruling, which could be a big problem for the administration.
For sure.
And then on top of all that, we have some really serious questions about due process and whether people are being deported without a fair chance to fight their case.
Yeah, the core issue is, what does an invasion really mean these days? And who gets to decide that? Is it the president or is it the court?
Right. And is this like setting a precedent for the future? Could this happen again in other situations?
And on top of that, we've got this whole international angle with the president of El Salvador weighing in and U.S. officials basically cheering him on.
That's pretty wild.
It definitely adds fuel to the fire.
It really makes you think about the balance of power in our government.
Absolutely. Like, what are the limits of presidential power, especially when it comes to things like immigration and national security? And what role do the courts play in keeping those powers in check?
So as we wrap things up here, here's something to think about. Given the history of the Alien Enemies Act and all these arguments we've talked about, what does all this tell us about the power struggle between the president and the courts, especially when national security is involved? And what could happen if we keep interpreting and applying this really old law in this way in today's world?
Lots to think about, that's for sure.
It's a really complex situation with potentially far-reaching consequences. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll keep you updated as this story continues to unfold.
Absolutely. This one's definitely worth keeping an eye on.